This is Campus Currency, and we are moving on to part 3 of 4 of the FAFSA Dependency questions. In this video, we're going to talk about foster care status, ward of the court status, emancipation, legal guardianship, and unaccompanied minors at risk of homelessness. This is the third set of questions that are the final wrap-up of dependency questions on the FAFSA. Video number 4, we'll talk about special circumstances for individuals. So the first thing to know is in the student demographic section, they're going to ask if you were a foster youth at any time or were in the foster care system at any time. This is different than the question that's related to foster youth that's in the dependency status questions. So this question is just asking if at any time you were in foster care because you may qualify for certain grants related to foster care status through your college or through the state that you reside in. And there's a link here for more information about the state child welfare agencies so that you can look it up if for any reason you may have been in foster care at an age where you were too young to remember or know. So when we get over to the dependency status questions, which is the section we're talking about in these videos, the first one will ask, at any time since you turned age 13, were both your parents deceased, were you in foster care, or were you a dependent or ward of the court? So this is the difference, is that they're asking after age 13 if you had no living parent, biological or adoptive, even if you are now adopted, if you were in foster care after the age of 13, even if you're no longer in foster care, or if you were a dependent or ward of the court, even if you're no longer a dependent or ward of the court. When they talk about a dependent or ward of the court, they're not talking about someone who's incarcerated. So if you were in a juvenile detention center or in the penal system somehow, this does not count as being a ward of the court or dependent. The second question on the dependency status for these set of questions asks, as determined by a court in your state of legal residence, are you or were you an emancipated minor? Now with this, they're talking about if you're an emancipated minor as of today, or if you were an emancipated minor immediately before you reach the age of being adult in your state, which may differ in terms of the age for each state. You need to check with your state. The court that determined your emancipation must be located in your state of legal residence at the time that the decision was issued. And if you're still a minor and the court decision is no longer in effect, or the court decision wasn't in effect at the time you became an adult, then you can't answer yes to this question. The next question is going to ask, does someone other than your parent or step-parent have legal guardianship of you as determined by a court in your state of legal residence? Now, we get these questions frequently where a student may say they are living with a grandparent or a family friend or other relative, but they haven't actually gone through the actual court system where it has been granted guardianship to a family member or grandparent or other person. So, first of all, you can't be considered a legal guardian of yourself. You can answer yes to this question if you're in legal guardianship as of today, or you were in legal guardianship immediately before you reached the age of being an adult. But you can't answer this question yes if you're still a minor and the court decision is no longer in effect. So it's possible you could have been granted guardianship for a temporary period of time and then that was rescinded before you became an adult. The other situation is if custody was awarded by the courts and the court papers say custody and not guardianship, then you must answer no to this question. The next set of dependency questions is going to ask, on or after July 1st of 2020, were you homeless or were you self-supporting and at risk of being homeless? So homeless obviously means lacking fixed, regular, and adequate housing. And obviously, if you're living in a shelter, park, motel, hotel, cars, abandoned buildings, etc., then you are at risk of being homeless, or you are homeless. And you can even be considered homeless even if your parent would otherwise provide a place to live, but it is an abusive situation that you're fleeing. So The next question will also is related to this, is that at any times after July 1st, 2020, did you receive a determination from any of the entities listed below that you were an unaccompanied youth who was homeless or were self-supporting or at risk of being homeless? So this would be like your high school or school district homeless liaison, the director of an emergency shelter or transitional housing program funded by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, the director of a runaway or homeless youth basic center or transitional living program, or none of the above. Now, the documentation that's going to be required is going to vary by the college that you're applying to, but all of these situations that were just outlined above are going to require you to submit documentation and paperwork to the college to prove the status that you're answering yes to, especially if that is the only status that makes you independent. So some of the documentation that you can submit would be court-ordered documents, that's for dependent or ward of the court, emancipated minor, legal guardianship, or foster care placement. Documentation from your state's Department of Children and Family Services or other similar state agency. Documentation from the high school district homeless liaison, emergency shelter, transitional housing, etc. These were listed in the questions before. The other thing is that a lot of schools are going to want you to provide a letter from a third-party non-family member. Someone who's aware of your situation that can attest and verify what you're saying is correct. So this could be like a lawyer, a clergy person from a church or synagogue or mosque or temple, a social worker, a therapist, somebody that's going to be able to verify and say, yes, I'm aware of this student's situation, I can attest to the fact that it's true, and they can provide their contact information so the college may follow up. Usually the college wants this on the letterhead from that agency or individual, along with their signature and contact information. Now, the important thing to keep in mind is that the burden of proof for these questions falls on the student. It's not on the college to prove that you met the standard. It's on you to determine that. So each college sets its own standards as to what is considered acceptable documentation. Some of the documents that you might submit to one college might not be accepted by another. It just depends on how the school has set up their standards. Some schools may want 2 letters from third parties. Some will only want to accept 1 letter. They're fine with that, but it's going to be determined by each individual school, so you'll need to contact and reach out to the financial aid office at each school that you're applying to. Let them know what the situation is and ask them what documentation you need to submit. So if you've answered no to all 13 of these dependency questions that we've gone over in the last 3 videos, then you're going to get to this screen where it says, based on your answers for the dependency status, you are considered a dependent student, which means you must provide your parental information. So if you're unable to provide that information and you have special circumstances, which we'll get into in the next video, then you'll be able to submit other documentation that might get you into a situation where you can get what's called a dependency override and be considered an independent student. So that's coming up in our section on part 4, the dependency override. Hopefully this information was helpful, and if you like the information, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video. Thank you.